People say a man who chooses solitude does so because he fears love. But the truth is, some men are hiding from pain that never healed. Today's story is about Silas Boone, a man whose scars became his strength. Out on the wide Wyoming frontier, everything began with one small choice, opening his gate to a woman who asked to learn how to milk a cow. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. There are moments in a man's life when everything he believes about himself collapses all at once, like watching your own house go up in flames, knowing damn well your hand struck the match. That morning I stood by the woodpile with an axe resting against my thigh when she emerged from the fog, like something half-dreamed, half-real. I'd spent 20 years alone on that Wyoming spread. 20 years of quiet mornings, cattle lowing and wire fences humming in the wind. 20 years of shutting the world out beyond my gate until Clara Reed stepped through the dawn haze. Her cotton dress clung to her from the long walk, darkened by mist, outlining her shape as she crossed the yard. Her brown hair was braided tight, swinging against her back with every careful step. When she stopped at the gate, her chest rose beneath the damp fabric as her eyes traveled across the open land before settling on me. "Morning, sir," she called, her voice smooth and steady like a good swallow of whiskey. "My name's Clara Reed," she said. "I'm here to learn how to milk a cow." Simple enough words. But the way she stood there, the sheen on her skin, the quiet confidence in her gaze, said more than she let on. It felt like warmth slipping beneath the door of a cabin I'd kept locked for 2 decades. I should have turned her away, told her to find someone else. Instead, her scent, wild grass sweat, and something dangerously close to temptation hung in the air around me, curling in my chest like smoke. When she crossed that gate, she wasn't just asking for work. She carried something heavy with her, something that would either pull us through or leave nothing but ashes behind. 2 weeks, I told her. Lessons start at sunrise. You follow my rules. Leave when I say you're done. No personal questions. No exceptions. She nodded, eyes bright with gratitude and something deeper. Resolve edged with shadows I couldn't quite read. It put me on edge the way the air does before a hard storm breaks. The next morning she arrived while the sky still blushed pink. Her work dress was patched but clean. Worn gloves clenched in hands that trembled just a touch. I led her toward the barn, each step making me too aware of her presence. The whisper of her skirt. The sway of her braids keeping pace beside me. Inside the barn breathed warm, thick with hay and cattle, but it was her closeness that made my skin tighten. I showed her how to approach Belle, my gentlest Holstein, kept my voice low. Movements slow. No sudden steps, I said. Cows sense fear. Clara followed my lead. Careful, but determined. When she crouched beside Belle, the fabric across her shoulders pulled taut, and I caught myself staring. My throat went dry as dust. I turned away, muttering under my breath at the heat rising in my chest. 20 years I'd mastered the habit of being alone. 20 years since a woman's voice had last undone me. I had no intention of letting it happen again. But Clara wasn't like the memories that haunted me. She didn't pry, didn't flirt. She worked. That patched dress darkened with sweat as she hauled buckets and pitched hay. Day by day, she learned faster than she should have. And it wasn't her progress that unsettled me. It was the way she listened, head slightly tilted, lips parted, taking in every word. The soft laugh she let out when Belle flicked her tail in protest echoed through the barn like something long forgotten. And with it, something inside me cracked. By the 3rd morning, she no longer needed direction to set the milking stool. Her hands fell into a steady pull on the udder, finding a rhythm of their own. It wasn't her improvement that unsettled me. It was the way she listened, head slightly cocked, mouth parted, taking in every word like it mattered. The way she laughed, light and unguarded, when Belle snapped her tail in irritation. That sound so out of place in my barn split something open inside me. A wall I'd raised to keep betrayal and loss from getting in. One morning, as she bent to clean the udder, a loose strand slipped free and brushed her cheek. The line of her neck, bare and damp, caught the sun slanting through the barn boards. My hands locked on the pitchfork pulse, pounding like a hammer on iron. I forced my eyes away, but the picture stayed an ember, glowing in the dry kindling of my solitude. On the 5th day, she asked the question that struck too close. "Have you always run this place alone, sir?" Her tone was curious, harmless, yet it dragged up echoes of laughter once shared in that very barn, of hands that used to work beside mine now gone. "That's not your concern," I snapped sharper than I meant to. Clara's cheeks colored as her gaze fell. "I'm sorry. You teach like you've done this with someone before." The honesty in her apology only made it worse. She wasn't angling for anything, wasn't trying to play me, and that made her dangerous. She was real. And real was what undid a man. By the 7th day, I noticed I was watching more than instructing. The way she spoke softly to the cattle, her voice settling their nerves. The way her fingers sure now worked with an ease that didn't match her short time here. I hated how her presence filled the space, how it made the quiet I'd prized feel empty. When she stumbled under the weight of a full bucket, I grabbed her arm without thinking. My hand stayed a beat too long. Her skin was warm, her breath caught as our eyes met. For a moment the barn seemed to close in the air, thick with something neither of us named. I dropped her arm like it burned and stepped back. "Watch your step," I muttered, turning toward the stalls. That night alone in the cabin, I couldn't shake the memory of her closeness. I'd built my life to avoid this connection, exposure, the pull of a woman who could take me apart. But Clara wasn't only learning to milk cows. She was learning her way past me, slipping through defenses I'd believed unbreakable. And I hadn't sent her off. Why her stubborn grit, her refusal to plead or maneuver, or the way her being there made me feel awake, something I'd buried so deep I hardly recognized it. By the 10th morning, she moved through the stalls with quiet assurance, drawing milk with a steadiness that matched my own. No longer the unsure woman who'd stood at my gate. She was different now. Capable. Alive. And far too close for comfort. As Clara worked beside Ironjaw, the most hard-headed Holstein on the place, she leaned low to adjust the pail. The heat of early morning had dampened her dress, and it clung to her back, tracing the gentle curve of her spine. A single bead of sweat slipped free, sliding slowly from her temple, tracing the curve of her cheek. It vanished beneath the edge of her collar. My breath stalled. My grip tightened on the pitchfork until the wood bit into my palm. I should have turned away, should have crushed the ache rising in my chest. Instead, my gaze stayed fixed on her movements, measured natural, effortless. She worked with intent, every motion sure. Yet there was a grace to it that stirred something raw and buried. Clara Reed lifted her head and caught me staring. Her lips parted as if a thought hovered there unfinished. No words followed, only a flush creeping up her neck. Her eyes held mine, steady and searching, making the barn feel suddenly too close. "Am I doing it right, sir?" she asked, her voice quieter than before, almost a breath. The question itself was plain enough, but the way she said it, slow, careful, sent a jolt through me. I stepped closer without meaning to my boots, scraping softly across the straw. "You're doing fine," I said, my voice rougher than I liked. "Just keep your hand steady." She nodded, yet didn't look away. The space between us thickened, charged with something that hadn't been there days earlier. I moved alongside her, telling myself I was checking her form, but I drifted closer than necessary, my arm brushing hers. The warmth of her skin shot through me. Clara froze her hand, stilling on Ironjaw's udder. For a long second, neither of us moved. The barn fell quiet except for slow breaths, the low presence of cattle, and the faint groan of old beams overhead. Her scent, earth, and wild grass filled my head, tugging me toward a line I'd sworn never to cross. Like this, I murmured, reaching for her hands. My voice barely carried. My fingers closed over hers, guiding the steady pull slow and even. Her hands were warm, roughened by work, yet gentle. The contact sent a surge through me, waking things I'd kept buried for 20 years. Her breath caught. Her body shifted her shoulder, brushing my chest. She tilted her head braids, slipping aside, baring the line of her neck. My eyes dropped to the pulse there, fast alive, matching my own. The urge to lean in to feel that skin beneath my mouth was nearly unbearable. My hand tightened over hers, and she didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled slightly, pressing back an unspoken answer to the heat building between us. The world narrowed to that single point. Her breathing, my heartbeat, the shared warmth of our hands. I leaned closer, my lips hovering near her ear, close enough to feel the heat rising from her. Clara. I breathed her name, slipping out like a truth I hadn't meant to voice. She turned her face inches from mine, eyes wide and searching. The space between us crackled taut, ready to break. My free hand twitched, aching to trace her jaw, to draw her nearer, until there was no distance left. Her lips parted, and I could almost taste her breath. Then Ironjaw let out a deep, guttural bellow, the Holstein's sudden roar ripping through the barn and shattering the moment. The cow lurched hard in her stall, tail whipping as another panicked bellow tore from her throat, hooves hammering the dirt. I jerked back as if burned, my hands dropping away. Clara Reed staggered, eyes wide, bracing herself against the rail. The rest of the herd picked it up, uneasy, lowing, rolling through the barn like a warning drum. Something was wrong. Cattle don't spook like that without cause. Instinct took over. I reached for the rifle, leaned against the wall. "Stay here!" I barked, urgency cutting my voice. Clara nodded but tightened her grip on the pitchfork shoulders, squared ready. I stepped outside. The morning light hit hard, bleaching the yard. The corral looked calm enough, cattle grazing beyond, yet the air carried a charge, the stillness before a strike. I swept the Horizon rifle tight in my hands. That's when I saw it, a thin ribbon of dust lifting off the track that led straight to my place. Too steady for wind. Riders, two, at least maybe three, moving fast. Cold settled in my gut. Drifters had been hitting the territory, burning spreads, and taking whatever they wanted. Had Clara brought this down on us? Was it tied to that thing she kept tucked away, the shadow I'd caught in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking? I glanced back. She stood in the barn doorway, pitchfork clenched, face pale but set. "Who's coming, Clara?" I demanded low and hard. Her mouth opened, then closed. Fear or guilt flashed across her face. The dust drew nearer, and I knew whatever she'd been running from had finally found us. I crouched behind the corral fence, rifle steady. The dust resolved into 3 riders, horses, pounding hats, pulled low. Clara hadn't moved. Her knuckles were white on the pitchfork eyes, flicking between me and the oncoming threat. The cattle's unrest had kept us from crossing a line neither of us was ready for. But now a different danger pressed in. "Get inside," I hissed. Clara shook her head, jaw locked. "I'm not hiding." The defiance in her voice sparked something sharp in me, admiration tangled with frustration, and a fear I hadn't felt in years. I wanted to argue to shove her into the barn and bar the doors, but there was no time. The riders closed in silhouettes, cut clean against the rising sun. My gut said these weren't wanderers. Their pace was measured, their spacing tight. They were hunting. The lead rider reined up 50 yards out, his horse snorting as he took in the ranch. Lean weathered a scar cutting his face. A colt rode his hip. The other two flanked him, hands resting easy near their guns. Boone, the leader, called, his voice slicing the morning. "We know you've got her. Hand over Clara Reed and we'll ride off peaceful." My blood locked. Her. They were here for Clara. I shot her a look, searching for answers, but dread had settled into her features. "Who are they?" I demanded, keeping the rifle trained on the man ahead. Her voice shook when she answered. "Men from my husband's past. From Thomas Reed. He owed them money. I thought I lost them when I left Cheyenne." The truth landed like a punch. Her husband's debts, that was the weight she'd been carrying all along. The weight behind her desperation was clear now. This wasn't just about keeping a ranch afloat. These men weren't ordinary creditors. They were hunters, and Clara Reed was the quarry. Last Chance Silas Boone, the leader, barked, his hand twitching toward his revolver. I didn't so much as blink. "You're standing on my land," I called back, my voice level despite the storm pounding my chest. "Ride out now or you don't ride at all." The man, Cole Mercer, curled his mouth into a thin smile and tipped his head. It was all the signal his men needed. The morning exploded. Gunfire ripped the air apart. I dove behind the fence as bullets tore into the boards, splinters snapping loose. Clara dropped flat inside the barn, scrambling for cover as shots cracked off the doorframe. I fired back. Rifles thundered, the sound rolling across the open ground. One rider howled, clutching his shoulder, but the other two kept coming. My mind raced. I couldn't hold them all, not with Clara exposed. "Get to the house!" I shouted, squeezing off another round. She hesitated, then bolted for the cabin. Her dress snagged on a nail as she ran, fabric tearing free. The flash of her thigh cut through the chaos, and my heart lurched with the memory of how close we'd come moments earlier. I shook it off and broke from the fence, staying low as I charged the third rider, just as he swung down. We hit the dirt, hard fists and dust tangling. He was strong. His punch split my lip. But years of hauling iron and breaking ground had hardened me. I drove him down, slammed his head against the earth until he went slack. Mercer was closing in, his horse bearing down. I rolled, snatched the fallen man's pistol, and fired. The shot caught Cole Mercer in the arm enough to send him reeling back with a curse. Then Clara screamed. I spun in time to see a wounded rider dragging her from the cabin, his arm locked tight around her waist. Her dress was torn wide at the shoulder, but her eyes burned as she drove her elbow into his ribs. He grunted, grip loosening. She tore free and stumbled toward me. "Run!" I shouted, firing again at Mercer. She didn't. Clara grabbed a shovel propped against the cabin wall and swung with everything she had. The blade slammed into the man's chest. He collapsed, choking, gasping for air. Mercer hauled back on his reins, his face twisted with fury. "This isn't over, Boone," he snarled, wheeling his horse around. "We'll be back for her." He and the remaining rider thundered off, leaving dust and their fallen man behind. I lowered the rifle, lungs burning, blood sliding from my split lip. Clara stood there, breathing hard, shovel still clenched in her hands, hair loose and wild. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of what had happened and what hadn't hung thick between us. "You didn't tell me," I said at last, my voice low-edged with accusation. Her eyes dropped guilt-carving lines across her face. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to pull you into this." The words stung, but not as much as the truth settling in. I was already too far gone. I'd fought for her, bled for her, and it wasn't just about protecting my land anymore. It was about her. A groan came from the dirt. I knelt beside the fallen man, checking for weapons. "He's alive," I said. "But they'll be back, and they won't come alone." Clara's jaw tightened, her grip firm on the shovel. Then I'll fight too. I'm not running anymore. I met her eyes and saw the fire there, the same spark that had drawn me in from the first morning. As the dust settled and the sun climbed, I knew this wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Those men wanted Clara Reed, and whatever debt trailed behind her was worth killing for. The question that settled heavy in my chest was simple enough. How much was I willing to give up to keep her safe? By evening, we stood at the gate together, the horizon bleeding red like an open wound. Clara rested her hand on the weathered wood, her shape cut sharp against the fading light. I watched her, and understood this wasn't the end of the fight, but the start of something neither of us had been ready to name. That gate once meant to keep the world out now stood open, not just to danger but to a future where trust might mend what years had broken. For 20 years I'd built walls to keep pain from finding me. One morning, one woman, one choice, and those walls came down. Sometimes protecting something means opening yourself up. Sometimes standing your ground means letting someone in. Was I right to risk it all for Clara? Was she worth the blood already spilled, and the blood still waiting to be paid? Some questions don't come with clean answers. Maybe the only thing that matters is what a man can live with when the day is done, and the light finally fades. Because those men would come back. And when they did, Clara and I would find out exactly what we were made of. And sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is open his gate to someone worth fighting for. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process, but every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.